Edward Einstein was born into a world of expectation. When brilliance runs in the family, how could he not be? The assumption that he would change the world with genius equations or scientific advancements was on his shoulders, and at first, he embraced the pressure. But as young Edward got older, he started to display some seriously disturbing symptoms. The final diagnosis knocked Einstein's world off its axis. 2 sons. Albert Einstein's first son, Hans, followed in his footsteps. He studied at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Zurich, just like his parents, and he became an expert in civil engineering. Like his father, Hans even made his way into history books thanks to his celebrated research on sediment transport. His father's favorite. But years before Hans' history-making research, he was just a bright young boy, and with a little brother on the way. Edward Einstein was born in 1910, and he quickly became the apple of his father's eye. As Albert's youngest son, Edward was given an endearing nickname. Hidden meaning. Albert Einstein referred to his youngest son as Tet, or Petit, for much of his childhood. This nickname wasn't only a reference to his age, however. Though Edward was a carbon copy of his brother and father in terms of intelligence, he was lacking in one very important way. Small and sickly. Edward was sickly from birth. Unlike Hans, who was tall and athletic, Edward was small and prone to exhaustion. There were times when Edward was forced to stay home while the rest of his family went out and explored, researched, and learned about the world. A flair for poetry. Still, just because Edward's health was less than ideal didn't mean he wasn't impressive in other ways. Not only did Edward live up to the Einstein name in terms of intelligence, but he also showed skill in the humanities, like writing poetry. But Edward really had a soft spot for music. Edward's musical skills. Just like his father, Edward grew up in a house filled with music. Albert Einstein even said himself that if I were not a physicist, I would probably be a musician. I get most joy in life out of music. The same could be said for Edward, who showed more of an interest in the humanities than his brother, Hans. At a crossroads. That said, the brothers had an easy relationship growing up. Hans once claimed that his father would frequently leave his studies behind in order to spend time with his sons. This would be one of the few happy memories from their childhood. By 1914, it was clear that Albert and Mileva were at a crossroads. Splitting up. Though they'd been married for 10 years, Albert had his eye on someone else, his cousin, Elsa. When Mileva learned the truth, she took her sons and moved them back to Switzerland. She and Albert lived apart for 5 years, and in 1919, they finally divorced. Like father, like son. At this point, young Edward was 9 years old and in a tough position. He loved his mother, who took care of him the most after the divorce, but he also deeply admired his father. As he grew up, Edward started to study his father's research as if he was his student and not his son. Edward's passions. When he was old enough, Edward enrolled in the same university that his parents and brother attended, the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology. While Albert was fascinated with physics and Hans dedicated his life to civil engineering, Edward's passions were far more cerebral. The whys of life. As much as Edward admired his father, he admired Sigmund Freud just as much. He was fascinated with the whys of life, why people do certain things, think certain things, and feel certain things. He even had a photo of Freud on his bedroom wall. It's Edward's love for psychology that made what happened to him all the more tragic. Alarming symptoms. You see, as Edward was studying to become a psychologist, he started to act strangely. His letters to his father became increasingly erratic, with no point or purpose behind them at all. And playing the piano, an activity that used to calm him down, would fill him with such passion that he'd pound away at the keys in a way that alarmed those around him. Fathers and sons. These could simply be the hallmarks of a passionate guy, but Edward's family knew better. Something was off about the young, quiet boy they once knew. He became especially interested in self-analysis, particularly thanks to Freud the analysis of fathers and sons. Retreating inward. He once wrote to his father, "People who fill their time with intellectual work bring into the world sickly, nervous at times, even completely idiotic children, for example, you me." Edward was so hard on himself that he started to retreat inward, refusing to leave his room. Edward's diagnosis. When he stopped going to school, Albert Einstein knew his son was in a bad way. Though Albert wasn't one for psychoanalysis, he knew that Edward needed to see a doctor. Sure enough, when Edward was just 21 years old, he received a startling diagnosis: schizophrenia. Only 2 options. The diagnosis was hard for Albert Einstein to bear, and not only because of his doubts surrounding the validity of psychoanalysis. "Things won't be easy for him," Albert lamented in a letter. The fact that his poor Tet was suffering made him miserable, but at the time, they had just 2 options when it came to Edward's condition. Into an institution. They could either leave him to his own devices or institutionalize him. After watching Edward struggle for 2 years with the disorder, the family chose the latter. As Edward's mental state continued to slip, Albert wrote, "My little boy's condition depresses me greatly." Totally transformed. Still, Einstein tried to be there for his son. He visited him occasionally, usually bringing along the musical instruments they used to enjoy playing together. But each time, Edward seemed like a different person, someone whose entire identity was snatched away by a disease. At first, Albert tried to assign blame. Resisting analysis. He theorized that Edward's mental illness was hereditary, and had been inherited from his mother's side of the family. He felt that nobody could do anything about Edward's condition and resisted psychoanalysis, which was a prominent treatment for schizophrenia at the time. Tensions rising. By the 1930s, the Edward the Einsteins had raised was almost unrecognizable. When Edward tried to throw himself out the window but was saved by Mileva, she became the dominant parent in Edward's life. Tensions were rising outside of the Einstein family, too.